Hello!
See how we do things in perfect synchronicity?
Today we're going to be reacting to a genre of video that I have avoided out of a belief that it will frustrate me enormously. That's kind of a theme with all the stuff we react to, but Tanner is acquainted with this content. It's from New Age to Jesus, so it's people talking about how they went from being New Age to converted to Christianity.
Yeah.
It seems like a lot of the time it's reconverted to Christianity, which...
It's like, I totally got into Buddhism in high school, and then Jesus saved me from New Age practices in college. Yeah.
We'll see what happens. I haven't watched any. I'm like, I'm kind of nervous for some reason. Well, we're going to start off with the top result, which is from New Age to Jesus, my testimony. It's by a woman called Melody, Alisa, and I'm going to click it. We're going to watch it.
Hello everyone, my name is Melody. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel today. So in today's video, you can see by the title what we're going to be talking about today. I'm going to be sharing my testimony with you, my spiritual journey of how I went from someone who was practicing New Age beliefs, or I guess not practicing.
Alright, we got a picture of her with, is that a Ouija board? What is that?
I don't know.
Right off the bat, I'm just gonna say I do like her vibe.
Do you think that she normally keeps that plant that close to the road?
No. She did it for the video.
Alright. I respect the craft.
Yeah. She's got a nice gentle energy. She's not insufferable like all the Mormon stuff we react to, so I'm already happy.
Practicing, I believed it, to where I am now, someone who has been in relationship with God, who knows Jesus, who doesn't doubt his existence anymore, who does not call God the universe anymore, and
What's your problem with calling God the universe?
All of these videos are like, save me from New Age practices, and it's like, well, no one ever explains why those practices are wrong. Like, what's wrong with calling God the universe?
Yeah, like, that's just a semantics difference. Like, what's the well, I mean, we won't go into it, but like, what are the practices? I'm so curious.
And sharing how I got to this point, where God met me when he came into my life, and just everything in between. I have been hesitant to make this video, to be honest. I don't exactly know why. It feels very vulnerable, and I don't know why God has placed it on my heart so heavily to share this with you, but in this season of life that I'm in, honestly, just throughout my life in general, I want to be obedient to what God is leading me to do.
Going from New Age, whatever, I don't know what she defines New Age as or what it looked like, but like just going from that to obedience feels like such a step down. Like going towards being more obedient to a patriarchal authority figure. That never to me feels like spiritual progression.
It always weirds me out that Christians refer to God, well, I guess it's in the Bible, as male. Like, if God is, you know, the beginning and the end, Alpha and Omega, all things that are and were and will yet be, like, how can you limit it to a specific
if God is Alpha and Omega and all things that can be, then God is everything. So we are God and the universe is God, and like I just feel like your own scripture like proves you wrong. Do you know what I mean?
So this is what obedience is looking like in my life right now, making this video and sharing my experience and journey with you.
Okay, so it seems like it's not so much her idea of obedience isn't like subscribing to prescriptions from somebody else, but doing what she feels God is inclined her to do. And that's like, I mean, New Age is such a broad term representing like so many varied beliefs. But I feel like the basis of most spiritual traditions is recognizing that you like are not in control, that things are chaotic, and like you don't have the ability to make things right for yourself, and what you have to do is surrender your ego to the forces that be. Like whether you call that God or the universe, it like doesn't matter, the thing is the same. It's like obeying the larger, you know, giving into the larger flow at play.
Yeah. But I mean, I don't know, like Mormons will say I feel prompted to do this, but she could also have like a set of rigid obedience rules.
Sure.
So let's start this story at the beginning. I grew up in Orlando, Florida. I was born June 19th, 1991.
And 1991, so she's 1 year older than me.
And more or less, I grew up in church. From a young age, my mom got us involved.
How interesting that Christianity was what was familiar to you and what your psyche was most comfortable with framing the world through.
Interesting.
Involved in the youth ministry at the church we were attending throughout majority of my childhood. This church had like a separate service for kids every Sunday that I went to. Looking back, a lot of my experience as a kid in church was very fear-based. I just remember being afraid of going to hell. Every Sunday when they would ask for people who want to give their life over to Christ, I would raise my hand every single Sunday, because they used to tell us that you went to hell, it would be like the worst pain you could ever imagine.
She's touching on something like valuable here. I don't know what her version of Christianity is going to end up looking like, but it kind of sounds like she's, you know, critiquing that fear-based style of Christianity, which you love to see.
Continuously, forever. It's like breaking your leg over and over again. And I had never broken a bone, but the idea of breaking my leg sounded terrible. So I just rose my hand every Sunday, went up there and gave my life to Christ, just in case I did something.
Gave my life to Christ just in case. What does that even mean?
Just in case he was going to destroy my life.
Does giving your life to Christ just literally mean putting your hand up and saying, I give my life to Christ? Meaningless. And then they said
otherwise he sends you to hell.
But
Really
everyone
appreciates
thinks
the show of support.
Thing during the week that canceled what I had done the previous Sunday. So it was just very, very fear-based for me. And I didn't know that at the time. That just seemed normal. And it was around this time, I would say middle school to high school, where a lot of things were changing in my life. And this is when I also started to have a lot of questions about Christianity, a lot of questions about God and Jesus. And I didn't have anyone to ask these questions to. And when I did find someone to ask these questions to, the answers that I got were answers that led me further away from him. So one of the big questions that I had was, what about people that live in the middle of nowhere? People who would never hear the gospel. What about them? Were they going to go to hell? And I remember in my golf program, there was a pastor or a preacher or someone who was in the church, and I asked this question to them. His answer to me was that they should just know. And I was like, that doesn't even make sense. Even as a middle schooler, I was like, that doesn't even make sense.
Can we just like fast forward?
And he said they should just be able to look around the world, to look at this. And honestly, when I got to college freshman year, I was at FIU in Miami. The last thing on my mind was God. I wanted to do me, okay? I was free. I could do whatever I wanted. And I started smoking. I started drinking. I got into a serious relationship and I started having sex. And I got heavy into all of that. By the end of my first semester as a freshman, almost every friend I made was either expelled or suspended from attending school due to the activities that we were participating in around.
It was wild. Interesting. This is interesting. Just like when religious people, you know, are free from like the controls of their religion and then they go wild, and so she starts like smoking and drinking, and it's like, that's not going to make anyone feel good. Like, you know, being too crazy all the time.
They sort of create the problem, like,
yeah,
it's like that documentary about the Hasidic Jewish people who leave and they're like totally cut off from the community.
Yeah,
and
it's like,
and then, you know, kid gets like hooked on cocaine, and everyone's like, see, that's what happens when you leave, you get hooked on cocaine.
It's like, no, that's what happens when you
get
control
cut off
someone
from your community.
Yeah, and when you've only ever taught someone to like evaluate how to make decisions based on this like religious frameworks, you haven't taught them like critical thinking skills or how to. You only want them to take care of themselves within this very narrow framework. You haven't taught them how to make decisions for themselves necessarily.
That left me my second semester of my freshman year just feeling isolated. I was depressed and didn't know it. I was just sad and embarrassed to feel like I didn't have any friends, even though I made friends, but they were all gone. It was just a really, really difficult semester for me. And it was during this time that I really started relying on weed to get by daily. So I started to smoke before I did anything, before I went to class, before I went to work. Because of my lack of social life, I picked up a second job just to stay busy, because staying in my room, I was just drowning in depression. And I didn't share this with anyone, and I myself really didn't even know I was depressed at the time. And so after another semester of being at FIU, I decided I did not want to do this to myself anymore, and I returned back to Orlando to finish out my college education at UCF. I found a book, and the book was by Eckhart Tolle.
Oh no, she's gonna show an Eckhart Tolle! No!
That book, just like light bulbs went off when I first.
Eckhart Tolle is even pro-Jesus. What's your deal?
it talked about the voice in your head, your subconscious, and
So woo. The voice in your head, your subconscious, so new agey.
Also, those are just like buzzwords. That was like not a coherent.
I know, it talked about the voice in your head. Yeah. And
we got it. And the subconscious. The subconscious is the part that's not talking. Like, what?
this is what I was afraid of.
how you are not the thoughts you are thinking, that don't identify with them. And it was the first time I had ever just heard anyone talk about your subconscious. It was the first time I'd ever read anything about those thoughts you have in your brain.
This is an argument for generals in education.
No, I always think that.
Like,
this
it
is
should
the
have
first
to do with
time
like
you heard about
psychology
your
101.
subconscious. Yeah. The book was about the constant chatter of your mind and said to achieve enlightenment, parentheses, peace, all you needed to do was live in the present and transcend thoughts about the past or future. I never read or talked to anyone about this mind chatter before, so this book made me feel like, wow, I'm not the only one experiencing this.
The only one experiencing
Mind
chatter?
chatter? Well, she grew up in a Christian community in Florida.
Like,
I guess
just
it's
not aware that
basically-
it's like. What were you assuming other people's experience was?
And I didn't know anyone else had thoughts like that. And so I was like, oh my gosh, someone else is experiencing what I'm experiencing. And I was really...
May I just say before we get into this, Eckhart Tolle doesn't advocate for crystals or chakras or any of that shit.
The book started to help me get out of my depression.
And also, I just want to say same. Eckhart Tolle's books, The Power of Now and A New Earth, have transformed my life. My testimony. Hannah's reading
From
A New
Jesus to Eckhart Tolle.
Earth. That's what I should do. We should do a parody from New Age today.
And that's what I thought. But looking back, therapy, I was in therapy. Therapy was helping me get out of my depression. But I correlated this book to getting me to...
But you said that reading it like really impacted you and made you like understand something you hadn't understood before. So I'm like, yeah, the therapy probably was helping too, but...
Yeah, what did you have to unlearn? Like, I feel like no like spark of intuition has ever gone away, regardless of at which point in my life I had it. Like, the genuine moments of intuition that I had in Mormonism still linger with me. I just had more moments of illumination that have like illuminated that illumination, but it's never like contradicted it. You know what I mean?
I'm wondering if because the Christian community will like condemn the New Age movement as like demonic and you know the way they be, if like she felt pressure once she sort of returned to her church environment to then be like, oh yeah, like I thought it was happening, but it was just you know like she's like needing to belittle her own experiences.
To a new, healthier mind state, and it was then that my just fire for New Age everything was lit.
Okay, so far we've learned that through New Age she realized that she could have a different mindset. She realized that, well, I don't know if she realized, but she learned that other people had mental chatter in their minds too, and you didn't have to be controlled by it. She doesn't even use that phrase, so I don't know if she like thinks that, but...
I was in this New Age sphere for about 5 years. I believed in spirit guides. I believed that when animals would randomly cross my path, that it was the universe trying to tell me something.
It's like she's converted like the energy that you would have as a Christian to New Age. Like, I believed in, even, is like a problematic phrase to me, because it's like, you believe in spirit guides, or you like recognize the value that this framework can add to your life if you understand that we are like inherently like symbolic creatures who think and subconsciously process through symbols, and especially these symbols that have been, you know, in our psyches for thousands of years. Expand on that.
I was also going to say that, again, the New Age is like such an umbrella term
So broad,
for
yeah.
literally just like any personal modality of spirituality, like taking away the power to dictate what spirituality looks like from the present power structures and saying that like you can do what works for you in your relationship with something bigger than yourself, however you want to label that, whether you consider that divine or not. Like, it's not like a brand of New Age spirituality that you even have to believe that the universe gives a shit about you. Like,
I also feel like a big theme of spiritual teachers that like really started movements was, like you said, like getting away from the old power structures and just this idea that someone else can dictate what you should do. And
I was gonna say about her experience again, just like, because like you said, she's taken the Christian model and just changed out all the flashy accessories. Like, she changed the Bible for tarot probably. And is like still working within like
dogma.
and this idea of this like personal deity that is just like sending you an animal to tell you a message. It's not so much that as like recognizing that your brain as the vehicle for consciousness is like able to perceive an aspect of yourself as this like interconnected web of being, and how joyous it is to like appreciate that in every moment. And I don't know.
Yeah.
It feels like there's like a lack of complexity of thought.
Yeah, definitely. It's very much through the lens of I believed in this, not like I had these realizations. Like for me, New Age, or it doesn't need to be called that, but you know, like my spiritual journey, which has involved a lot of things that I consider New Age. Like if I was talking about it, I'd talk about, I mean, I might talk about meditation as a practice, but then I'd also go into why and like what realizations I had throughout the spiritual process, rather than just like, I believe in this now, I believe in this. Like, that doesn't mean anything. Someone can believe in tarot cards and just be dogmatic and silly about it, and it could really serve like no useful purpose in their life, or they could be very aware that tarot cards are just like a modality of like potentially accessing, you know, this style of contemplation that is useful to apply to your life. So I just feel like with anything, with any religion really, because there are like New Age Christians, like Eckhart Tolle talks favorably about Christ and believes that Christ had, you know, the same experience that he's trying to teach people about, and you know, talks about the Buddha and who's the guy, the Taoist guy?
Lao Tzu.
Yeah, Lao Tzu. And anyway, so it's not either or. I feel like if you kind of understand these certain principles, you know.
I did not believe in God. I called God the universe. I believed in...
How fucking dare you? God hates being called the universe.
So offensive.
And manifesting. I believed that all I had to do to have confidence, to feel loved, to have peace in my life was to watch my thoughts and to not identify with them and to just let them come and go, and that if I just tried
like this idea that all you need to do is this is just like usually not going to take you to a good place, because it's like, yeah, on a certain level I would say that peace does come from being present and watching your thoughts, but like it's not that simple. And I just think if you reduce it to a dogma, you're going to have issues, because you're not like making space for humanness, and yeah, you're kind of like spiritually bypassing yourself.
Yeah, I just adding to what you said about beliefs, like I feel like my understanding of New Age spirituality is that like beliefs are sort of contradictory, like they're counterproductive to spirituality, because when you have a belief about something, it precludes your ability to believe the opposite.
Yeah.
And then you're like incapable of understanding the paradox, and that's like at the core of the mystery of the spiritual tradition. Like,
yeah, I mean, just as a basic example, like look at the average Mormon. They'll be confronted with new evidence that contradicts their beliefs, and they'll double down, and they can't take in new information, which is like you're stunting yourself as a person if you can't absorb and take on new information and learn from it. You're not growing in the way that you could be. You're not tapping into your full power as a human being who has, you know, kind of this supercomputer brain that's like capable of so much.
And I think that's the thing when I see people like going into New Age traditions, and it seems like from most of the videos I've seen on here, it's people getting into the shiny distractions of New Age crystals and tarot. It's like that's not really the core of what it's about.
I'm not into any of that stuff. I think it can be like a method people use that is valuable, and like never say never. I haven't personally felt like drawn to that stuff at this point. But yeah, it's totally unnecessary.
But the regression back into just like this dualistic Christian idea usually is just like the inability to like have, I shouldn't say not discipline, because I hate when people are like, you just didn't work hard enough, but like an ability to hold paradox. Like there is, like too many people, it's too chaotic, it throws a wrench in the sprockets, makes things too hard to hold on to. You need like more of a sense of control.
We were just talking while the camera was off and we were waiting for our battery to charge, as we always are for most of our lives, about how, yeah, people with spirituality will get caught with shiny object syndrome, where, you know, they love the idea of crystals and like the law of attraction, I can get anything I want and all of that stuff. But I feel like true spirituality, or like the kind that's been the most helpful in my life at least, is kind of like more boring, and it's more about just observation, like observing yourself, like she mentioned, observing your mind. That is part of it. I think like meditation is pretty essential for most of us if we're gonna, you know, kind of like get a handle on our minds and be able to like focus them in a more powerful way.
Yeah, if there are problems going on in your life, how do you do anything about them if you're not aware of them?
Yeah.
And how do you become aware of them if you're just always caught?
Yeah, you don't just like law of attraction your problems away with crystals. You have to like go deep and be like, what's the conditioning that is impacting my suffering right now? Like, what beliefs do I have about myself or the world that may be holding me back? Like, there's a lot of stuff, but I feel like, yeah, it's a lot of unpacking. It's a lot of, like, if I had to describe spirituality kind of in a nutshell, it would just be someone like sitting there. Like, I feel like that's my like visual spirituality, not this like witchy aesthetic with crystals and tarot cards. Like, those things are all fine and good and like can be, but really, like, you can't get away from the need to do the boring inner work, I think. And the work to, like, when you touched on discipline, because, you know, you're thinking of the importance of learning to focus your mind, right? And it is discipline. Like, it's hard to meditate.
Yeah.
It's really hard.
It is.
But then you do it and you feel great.
Yeah, and like, think of every like archetypal wise person. They do have the ability to sit still, where most of us can't handle 5 minutes of alone time, of just being alone with their own thoughts.
When I was more couldn't. Like, I always needed a thing, and that was damaging.
And I feel that now, and granted, I get better and better at it, but oof.
Alright, we got another battery break.
I carried crystals around with me. I used to gift people crystals. I was just very, very heavy into everything that came with.
That's another telling point if you're into everything. Like, you want, because I feel like with us there's like things that will sort of draw you in at different times. But I'm like, if you're trying to do all of it, then how deeply are you going with each methodology? Because, like, again, crystals are like a methodology for intention setting, or like trying to invite a certain thing into your life more. They're not like magical in and of themselves. But if you're doing all these different things, you're only going so shallow with each thing, and it doesn't sound like she has like sort of...
I have empathy for trying to just get a wide base of a lot of things, and I struggle to get super deep on any one thing.
See, but I'm like, the method is... They're all just different methods. Like, it's not important to have all of them.
I feel like everyone who's like, I did all the things in New Age, and like the thing you needed the most and didn't do was like Zen.
Yeah,
just
seriously.
some like straight face Zen.
She hasn't mentioned meditation yet, so I'm like,
I'm
like, if New Age without meditation, I'm skeptical.
But then it's just aesthetics, like.
Exactly. Yeah. Let's hear if she mentions meditation, but.
I was still struggling though. I struggled with my confidence.
Any belief system, like, no belief system is supposed to like absolve you from struggle. Like, struggle is part of being a human being, and nowhere in New Age theology, whatever that even is, you can't pin it down, does it say that, you know, Eckhart Tolle's not like, you'll never struggle again.
No, it's like life is suffering.
It's like,
that's like number one.
Yeah, but it's like there is a sort of piece that you can tap into within yourself through certain contemplative practices.
Yes.
That, you know, just make it easier to suffer less and to not like add to your suffering through the thought loops and all that stuff.
I struggled with my relationships with others, especially men. I had this commitmentphobia.
Is that so much of like a New Age thing?
like,
Is
how
it just
does
like
that
a phase
relate
in life? Like, if you're young and in college and like not wanting to settle down yet, that's fine.
You can't blame like New Ageism for your commitment phobia. That's probably conditioning that was there long before the New Age stuff came into your life as an adult. You know, that was probably related to childhood, if it's anything.
Where you're at in your psychosocial
like,
development.
And also, were you a commitment focused? You were raised with Christianity, and you felt like a lot of pressure to like marry, and so then there was, you know, there's a lot to unpack in that.
I was constantly striving for that, but never seemed to be able to remember to do all these things to get to that point.
Remember to do all these things? What are the things that you're supposed to... If she's taking too much on. She's like, oh, I forgot to do my crystals, so I'm still a commitment
Towards the end of college, I decided that I wanted to move abroad, and I moved to Korea. And that is where God found me, or met me, rather. When I was in Korea, I was isolated. I went there knowing absolutely no one.
Let me guess, there was a Christian congregation nearby, and they invited her in with open arms.
Easy prey for a congregation.
Come on, I was hoping for a little bit more than this. I was hoping for a deconversion story.
Luckily, I met people, but within the first 3 weeks of me moving across the globe, I had a breakup. And so I was absolutely in love with this person that I was dating, and he broke up with me, and I was devastated. I was vulnerable. I had never cried so much in my life, and again, I was isolated. I met some people, but I've only been here for 3 weeks, and I didn't feel comfortable just boo-hoo crying around them, but I was heartbroken. I was just so incredibly sad, so incredibly isolated.
It sounds like what she's needed the whole
I didn't know
time.
what to do, I didn't know who to turn to.
I'm sorry.
And it
Was good friends.
Yeah, community.
she was-
Like, that's why people join religions.
oh, sorry, it's being so fucking annoying. There.
What the fuck is happening? Also, just like the abstract concepts, like God met me there. It's like, what are you actually saying? But yeah, Christianity was where she was her community growing up, and it's natural to, you know, that's what's familiar, that's what's comfortable, that's what's safe.
And then she went to college, got too wild.
Got friends that it sounds like were doing hard drugs and crazy stuff, because
Yeah.
if they all got expelled, that wasn't just like college drinking, that was like something else.
And then she's left without community, finds
Mhm.
New Age,
Mhm.
gets into therapy, things are going well.
Gets really into New Age, like in the dogmatic way that she's talked about.
That doesn't really sound like two and two.
It doesn't. Well, the thing is, it's like, okay, so she's having this breakup in Korea, and she hasn't even made. I mean, she hasn't mentioned like meditation throughout the whole video, which we've already flagged, but like she hasn't talked about how her New Age practices like helped her. Like, so if I'm going through a breakup in another country, you know, because of people like Eckhart Tolle and these other New Age teachers, I have so many practices that I feel like I can use to like confront those feelings and process them healthily, and like, yes, it sucks, and yes, it's still painful, but it's not a problem. Do you know what I mean? So you're going through a breakup, you're really sad, you're supposed to be really sad.
Mhm.
I don't know, she hasn't talked about how, like, you know, I did my usual practice of, I don't know, journaling.
I kept that crystal in my pocket and nothing happened. I was still crying.
But you know, she like hasn't made mention of anything that I would consider like a helpful New Age practice in a situation like that.
Yeah, what were her spirit guides up to? No
Because
shamanic drumming, nothing?
again, I just think spirituality, a massive bulk of it is the ability to sit with your feelings rather than run away from them, because if you can't sit with them, then comes the story making that your brain needs to do to get away from them, and so, do you know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
if you can't sit with your feelings, you're pretty doomed to suffer a lot, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to do everything that I had learned in these books.
What was it? What were you doing? I would love to look that good when I cry. She's just like
Just looking
flawless.
flawless.
I know.
To get myself out of the sadness that I was feeling.
I mean, I'm being like, it might be me being pedantic about semantics, but I'm like, you don't necessarily need to be trying to get yourself out of how you're feeling. You probably just need to sit with it for a bit.
Mm-hmm. That's like, again, the core of New Age teaching, is that like the way out of pain is through pain.
In, baby.
Yeah.
Nothing was working. And I have to backtrack a little bit to let you know that I lived in a small town called Yeongju, and you have no control over where you are placed when you're an epic teacher. And it just so happened that in my incoming class, spring 2015, there were 2 other girls who were going to be placed in the city of Yeongju with me, and they would end up
Let me guess.
becoming 2 of my best friends. And one of them was an ex-missionary. And so when I'm going through this breakup and trying to deal with this sadness by myself, 2 other English speakers that I know in this new town that I'm living in this new country that I'm living in, she invited me to go to church with her. And after we would go to church on Sundays, we would go eat shabu shabu afterwards, which is kind of like a hot pot.
She's building community. She's creating weekly rituals that help her like connect to her spiritual sense of self. Of course, that's going to be better than like sitting alone in your room with a crystal trying to talk to your spirit guides, you know.
It takes a village to raise an inner child.
Yeah.
And I finally had someone to answer all of those long-standing questions that I had about what happens to people who never have the experience or never get the chance to have someone tell them about God. Are they going to go to hell? What is the meaning of this? What is the meaning of that? And it was questions that were keeping me from even looking over at God, thinking He's cruel.
It's interesting because it's like she met someone who whose interpretation of Christianity was just like more like in line with what she would want. So I don't know. It's not. She's not really like truth seeking, if you know what I'm saying. Like, she grew up in what she described as a very fear-based version of Christianity, and when she asked like, what about these people that have never had the chance to hear the gospel, they're like, oh, you should just know. So it sounds like she maybe had like more empathy than the community she grew up in, or like the teachings that circulated. So then she finds someone who says things that are more in line with maybe her level of empathy, and so then she's like, oh good, I found God. And it's like, no, you just found like a version of Christianity that's more palatable to you. You never really abandoned Christianity, because clearly you still, like, you couldn't get me back to Christianity. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like after getting into contemplative practice, it would be really difficult for me to.
In the classic sense, because the nice thing about like New Age spirituality is that it doesn't discount Jesus.
Yeah, so I guess I was thinking of it as I said it, like, yeah, I guess I should.
She probably never ran into anyone that was like, you know, Jesus was a fraud. Like, it was probably like, yeah, great teacher, love that guy.
That's like
so she probably never really like separated herself, and she's like, I've just been calling it the universe this whole time. Like a bimbo, I should have been calling him God, and now my life is easy. No more crystals.
The universe. Yeah, like I mean,
you're talking about Jehovah, like Yahweh, like. What?
Yeah. It's interesting, and like clearly there was a hole in her life when she met the Christian friend. So of course you're gonna like dive into that, especially if it's familiar and comfortable. And
during a terrible breakup, you meet your best friend who has answers.
Yeah.
And can match your level of empathy. Awesome.
Whereas like I feel like me in that situation, I'd be like, oh, that's awesome that you're Christian. Like I'm not. I still accept your friendship, and it's like really amazing that you've come into my life. And I wouldn't feel the need to. That's another thing, when people are like vulnerable and don't have kind of like a strong sense of self, or a strong sense of not self. There's like that. Like vulnerability to just like taking on other people's beliefs just because you want to belong, and it's like you feel like you can't belong almost unless you have the same beliefs. You know, you can't just be like, this is a great friend that I have. I don't know. If you have a lot of unhealed trauma or pain, a common thing is to always be looking for like the answer, rather than, I feel like my version of spirituality is like the small things that you do to sort of create a healthier environment for yourself, like internally and externally. And yeah, I don't know. It's interesting, like remembering being back in that mindset of like, I need some big answer. I need like the thing.
And for her, and for
because
most people,
it's
like
in salvation. It's like, I need to be saved. I need to this. I hate this. I can't sit with this. So I need someone to take me away from it rather than through it.
And what they needed was just a community and a sense of purpose.
I'm really trying not to feel like an ex-woman who's like, you just did it wrong, but it's just, I mean.
And there's technically nothing wrong with like going back to Christianity, as long as you're not perpetuating like so many of the problems associated with, like, especially American Christianity.
And I would also say that.
But I don't know how hers is probably like a great version. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe. I think there's a lot she missed in New Age, and I'd say like maybe the main thing she missed. So I do think there are Christians who like are very New Age, and I hate using the term New Age.
I know. Every time, like, I don't even identify.
Like I wouldn't say I'm New Age. I'd say I was Buddhist before I'd say I was New Age, or I don't know. But even then, it's like there's so many like great. There's like Taoism and Buddhism, and then there's things in what's the other? There's like the Vedic tradition, like the oldest body of wisdom we have, or something.
Zoroastrianism.
Yeah, and there's so much stuff in all of it that like neuroscience and science now shows to be true. Like in the Vedic tradition, there's like so much stuff that has now been proven with science. So clearly, like earlier humans had access to some kind of intelligence, connectedness with something higher.
That's kind of what I hate about the term New Age. It suggests that like there's this whole new way. I mean, this is very Mormon of me, but there is something like restorative about going back to old wisdom, discarding like arbitrary traditions that have just lived on for no reason, and getting back to some of the core practices and fundamentals. Like, that's a part of Mormon theology that I think is really good. Whether you call it restoration like Joseph Smith or the archaic revival like Terence McKenna, there is something valuable in going back, and that's what like the New Age is about. And I feel like it's only using ancient solutions to approach like contemporary problems.
Yeah, and it's only, what's new about, so for example, people criticize like what I feel like is often referred to as like white woman Buddhism or whatever, and I'm always like, I feel attacked. But people have like beef a lot of the time with this, with people bringing like ancient stuff like yoga coming to the West, and I'm like, I think there's ways that people like are definitely not understanding like the ancient wisdom behind it, But I'm like, is that a problem? I don't really know, because I think like more yoga is better than less yoga, like more, you know, so I don't really know.
And I'd say most of the criticism there is around, again, just adopting the aesthetics that also have like cultural significance that's not appreciated by the person adopting them.
Yeah.
But if you're again aligning with some of the core values of awareness and compassion, like I think you tend to stay away from that. But it's true.
Let me say something about that. Okay. Well, I just think another, like a thing about that is like, who's to say that someone's not appreciating it, you know? Because even if you go back in time to when those ancient traditions were, you know, current, there's always going to be people in them who like aren't genuinely like into them, but like they don't really get them the way that other people do. And who's to say that like, oh, your version of spirituality is like is offensive or meaningless and such? Do you know what I mean? It's like everyone's just sort of where they're at. So I mean, yeah, I mean, if it's like just you're like buying a Buddha head from Urban Outfitters and it's purely aesthetic, then I'm a bit like, oh, that's cringe. Like I don't love that.
Or wearing, you know, a Native American headdress to
at Burning Man. Yeah. Like I'm not denying that like cultural appropriation happens, but I don't know. I think there are people that do like get into things like crystals and tarot and well, those things aren't really ancient. What's a better example like an ancient thing?
I mean, somewhat.
Anyway, I think there's people that do like get into this stuff and maybe they do have quite a surface level understanding, but like it's still real to them. And again, I'm just like, who's to say what someone else's spirituality is?
Sure. I think of like, you know, Roger Stone, the criminal mastermind behind the Trump campaign, like guy is like a sleazeball by like every conventional standard of goodness, just like loves to cheat, like is an open cheater, openly like a malicious person. And his wife is like a Buddhist. And I'm like, what? And you know, a lot of Buddhists have either done like you know, committed great acts of violence, or else have been very passive in the face of great violence being done. And so it's not to say that just because something is ancient or like from another culture that it's like inherently good.
Well, I think because there are so many ancient like religions and traditions that have sort of tapped into the same wisdom, there's always going to be people that follow things for reasons like community or aesthetic, or you know, like they want to be spiritual and that's just kind of like what they have access to, so they kind of, I don't know, there's just always going to be people that see it differently. And that's why like what's good about New Age and being post-religion spirituality is you aren't like tied to any one thing. So it's like the Buddhists don't represent me. Like I think there's a lot of great stuff I've taken from Buddhism, and if I like had to describe my ideology, I might use that term because it's like the closest thing. But at the same time, yeah, I think it's good to have like a cafeteria style of spirituality, because that means you're actually taking on principles and practices because they've resonated with you, and not just because, oh, I'm going to be a Buddhist now. You know, like when I became Mormon, I remember being like, should I change my MySpace profile to say I'm Mormon? That would be cool. Like, then I'd be a Mormon. I don't know. It was like a thing that I felt like would give me a sense of belonging or give me an edge. Mormonism has an edge. Anyway, but yeah, like no like ideology is going to have like all of its followers be perfectly adhering to the original principles, and that's why spirituality is such a personal journey. And you can't judge where someone else is at, because like I could do something really shitty and you could be like, wow, that's like not very evolved of her, but then I could have like such complete awareness in my mind of doing it, and like you would know that, or like, do you know what I'm saying? Like there's never really a way to know where someone's at in their practice, or like how they're growing, or any of it.
Missionary who has been trained to answer and engage and bring people to Christ, to have her as my friend and to have been placed in this town with her.
She's definitely a sign seeker, isn't she? She talks about how like the dogs passing in the road, she would see that as a sign, and same thing here.
We had an incoming class, again, epic spring 2015, of 300 other foreign teachers. And
what are the chances that one other one would be, or is she saying?
God orchestrated for us to be in the same town. And it was something that she said to me one day after church that had changed my life. She told me that it's not about religion, that it is about relationship, that God just wants to be invited into my life.
I would say that's true, like without the like personification of God as a man. But it's not about religion, it is about relationship. I'd say the same thing about New Age. It's not about what you believe, it's about your relationship to it. Boom, that's the video.
And it was in that moment that I thought, I can do that. I want that. I want to do life with someone. If that's all it is, I can do that. And my life was changed then.
It's fine, it's fine. I don't like criticizing something that's obviously emotional for her.
Mm.
But I think sort of conversion to ideology should come through like experience of realizing the ways it helps you, but maybe she would say that as well.
I mean, that's what she's saying. It changed her ideas of commitment. She's ready to.
Yeah, it's
Ready to get the house with the right rug and the nice tree.
She's got the right rug. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting to me, like saying something like meditation changed my life versus like, I don't know, this coincidence happened and I met a friend and I went back to Christianity and she said he just wants you to invite you in, or he just wants you to invite him in. I don't know, it just feels like a shallow conversion to me. Am I being rude?
I mean, I think that's how most conversions happen.
Yeah, I know.
It's like, oh yeah, we're convinced